Ed 1030 students. So I created this video because we only have one class day this week because I'm going to be in Nashville for the conference, as I've told you. So I thought it would be best because you would need the material because we're going to miss one whole day of class this week. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of talk a little bit about Chapter 10, kind of guide you what I want you to do, kind of guide you into what we're talking about a little bit, and hopefully that will help you and support you when you work in this chapter this week. So last week we really talked about how do you collect information, research. What do you do when you find a topic you want to research? How do you research? What sources do you use? How do you gather information? We even talked about how do you interpret and evaluate it, and then pull out the pieces you need so you can use it the way you need to use it, whether that's a paper, a presentation, whatever it is, a speech. We need to be able to use the information accordingly, but we have to learn how to research it. So kind of was following up with our library class that we had. And you actually had an opportunity to earn some bonus points on that library module quiz. So I do hope that you took advantage of that. So this week, we are going to talk about critical thinking and thinking in college. So in college, you have to use college level thinking. So you have to be able to apply your knowledge in a way that's practical. It's a little bit different when you are in college because it really talks about how you have to be more creative and not only think critically, excuse me, but how do you collaborate with others and how do you relate that to critical thinking? So we're really going to be diving into that in our chapter 10. So I want us to look at, of course, I wanted to remind you that we do have the reading organizers. I hope that this whole semester you've been doing these and completing these because they really give you a good understanding of using an outline to help you be able to study and understand the material. So at the beginning of the year, or excuse me, at the beginning of the semester, I said that I would take bonus points for students who are using these. Remember, you get an attendance/participation grade, so you can receive extra points for that for completing them. So I have to see evidence that you've been doing that all along. I know I tell you not to turn it in, but that's just something that you can think about that might help you, especially if you need a few extra points. So make sure you complete the Chapter 10 reading organizer. You won't turn it in, but it is there to help you study. Even if you don't use these to study for the quiz per se, which it's useful for that, it's really helpful for exams. I also have a PowerPoint here. Remember, PowerPoints go along with the text, but it doesn't talk about everything in the text. So just keep that in mind. So on PowerPoint slide 1, it really talks about the types of critical thinking and what does it mean when we talk about college level thinking. So in your textbook on page 225, 226, it really defines the two types of thinking, fast thinking and slow thinking. Fast thinking really is more automatic based on emotions. You don't even think about it. It's almost subconscious thinking. But we also have slow thinking, where you're more rational and logic and making connections and more careful with your thoughts. So the book really talks about that on page 225 and 226. Okay, and it goes a little bit more into how college level thinking needs more slow thinking and how that's really what we want critical thinking to start to look like. We also have to talk about how you develop your strong thinking skills. How do you start doing that? Page 227 to 230 in your textbook really starts to dive into this and what that looks like when you're trying to start to develop those critical thinking skills. On page 231 in your book, I want you specifically to look at examining evidence. That's part of developing those strong thinking skills. And in the slide, we touch on it, but I really want you to look in your textbook on that. continuing on to talk about developing strong thinking skills, we also have to look at these things, right? What is logical fallacies? What is faulty reasoning? And this goes back to what we were talking about in Chapter 9 when you were doing your research. We said that they have an agenda and they're trying to sell you something. So as a critical thinker, it's important for you to think back to that chapter and the things that the book talked about and what we talked about in class, because this is really going along with that. So on page 233, I specifically want you to look at figure 10.1, and I want you to test yourself. I want you to rate your critical thinking skills. So, and hopefully we have time to do this in class, but this just gives you an understanding of where you are and do you need to work on developing your strong thinking skills. Now, on slides 8 and 9, we're doing this. Why do I want you to develop your critical thinking skills? How is this going to help you, right? In a minute, I'm going to show you a video on Bloom's taxonomy and critical thinking that is there to support you, that I think will help you even dive further into connecting and understanding what a critical thinker is. But when you're applying your critical thinking skills in college, it goes beyond just rote memorization, right? You really start to develop how you think, how you collaborate. You think about how they kind of go together, about diversity, about being creative, all those things. And you'll see in the Bloom's taxonomy, which we'll talk about in class, how important these things are. So 8 and 9 really goes over that. So in the video, I'm going to show you in a minute, it talks about Bloom's taxonomy and your first year of college, how important this is. So the Bloom's taxonomy was created to give you a visual, right? It's a system of reaching goals in college, right, of the learning process. So these are things that your teacher are expecting of a college level student, right? So there's different levels you start at. So think about this like a tiered cake, right? So the bottom part is the foundation. This is what holds it all together. And as it gets higher and higher, you get to the top, right? So this cake here has different layers and tiers. And in each tier is a level. So remember, obviously, is the first level. Then you have understand, you have apply, then you move to analyze, then you move to evaluate, and then create. And then you'll look on each level, it gets us a little bit harder, where you have to develop stronger critical thinking skills. And your teacher is going to be asking you to do different things, right? Remember is just where you're able to recall and recite something. But if you can analyze it, you're able to remember, understand, apply it, and then you can analyze it, okay? So you'll see as you move through the steps, this is really diving deeper into the learning process, which is essentially critical thinking, okay? So pages 234 to 237 really talks more about that, okay? So going back to the learning resources in those videos, I told you there's 2 videos here to help you. So the first one's called What is Critical Thinking? It's a short video that talks a little bit more about what it is and why you would use it and what ways would you apply it. And then looking back at that Bloom's taxonomy that we just showed you, that system of the learning process, they're interviewing someone that's speaking about Bloom's taxonomy and the different levels that you would use and in those situations. So these 2 will help you even gain a deeper understanding. Now, let's look at how you're going to be assessed this week. Obviously, you're going to have your Chapter 10 quiz, and then we're going to do another case study. So looking back when we were talking in Chapter 9 about Jane, this one, we are talking about Michael. Okay, this is based on a real student. We just changed the name. I want you to read about Michael, and then I want you to complete these 4 discussion questions. Now remember, we talked about how discussion questions for case studies are a little bit different than a discussion board because you have to be really in-depth. And you remember, we are going to be looking at providing a thorough textbook-based response. This is just not yes, no, 1-sentence answer. And you'll look, the first discussion question has more than one part. You first have to tell me what slow thinking is, then what's fast thinking, and then does Michael seem to be using slow or fast thinking when he works on his response papers? And then you're going to tell me how can you tell. So remember, when you're answering these questions, I want you to go back in the textbook where it talks about on page 225 and 226, what is fast thinking, what is slow thinking, okay? What does he seem to be using based on his case study? And then how can you tell? Well, what does the book tell us about fast thinking and slow thinking? And you're going to go back and look at that, and that's going to help you be able to answer that more thoroughly. The next one goes back to what is the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy that Michael seems to be functioning at when he prepares his response paper. And remember, I talked about how in Bloom's taxonomy is in your textbook on page 234 to 237. It's going to talk all about Bloom's taxonomy. So I want you to look in that book section, and I want you to see in his case study, where do you think he lands, right, on that system, that tier, when he's preparing them, and how can you tell what level he's at? The third question is, what should Michael join a study group? Why or why not? Remember, we talked about how critical thinking and collaboration go hand in hand, right? So think about, do you think, based on what you've read up here, should Michael join the group? Tell your thoughts why or why not. When you tell me why, go back to the textbook. What does it say about collaboration and critical thinking? Do you think this would help him? And then the last question is, what are some strategies Michael could use to improve his thinking while working on response papers? Okay, so go back to developing strong thinking skills in your textbook, right? What strategies from there might help him? So go back and look at that when you're thinking about the answer to this question. So that pretty much covers chapter 10. I hope that this video is going to help you, considering that we only have class for one day next week. So please make sure you watch this video. I'll be sending an email telling you it's on the course homepage, is where you'll be able to find it. So make sure that you watch it all the way through. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me in class or through email. All right, guys, have a great week, and I will see you in class. And if not, I will see you whenever we meet for week, let's see, wow, week 11. Excuse me. So Thanksgiving week. I'll see you then. So guys, just real quick before I let you go, we don't have much time left. We're in Unit 3, but after 10, we'll only have 2 chapters left, right? And then we have our capstone and our final. So we'll be talking about that Thanksgiving week, about how we're going to be wrapping up the semester. So I guess I will see you then. Take care, guys.